The sun had barely cleared the ridgeline when Elena Alvarez trudged across the firing range, a bundle of worn paper targets clutched in her arms. Dust clung to her boots, and sweat trickled down her back beneath the stiff camouflage blouse. She wasn't supposed to be here. At least, not in the way that mattered. Elena wasn't a shooter, not a marksman, not even officially assigned to range duty. She was the lowest rank in her unit, barely weeks into her first deployment, and her job this morning was simple: replace the torn-up practice targets before the SEALs arrived to train. She kept her head down, hoping not to draw attention. The range was sacred ground, a place where reputations were forged and destroyed with every trigger pull. To her, it was just a chore, a menial task she performed because no one else wanted to. But as she worked, she couldn't help but notice the patterns on the shredded targets. Perfect clusters of bullet holes, tighter than her palm. Whoever had fired those shots wasn't just good. They were extraordinary. A sudden crack echoed across the range. Elena flinched. Dust leapt from the sand, just meters from her boots. She spun around, heart hammering, and saw them, the Navy SEALs. They were everything the posters promised: tall, broad, wrapped in gear that made them look less like men and more like walking arsenals. Their rifles gleamed in the morning light, and their eyes carried that cold, unshakable focus that only came from years of combat. One of them smirked. "Careful, rookie. Targets don't walk down range while the line's hot." Elena's face flushed. She muttered an apology, clutching the paper sheets tighter, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. The laughter rolled over her like a wave. Not cruel, exactly, but sharp, cutting. She was the outsider, the girl sent to fetch and carry. And then one voice silenced them. "Hey," said a man at the far end of the line. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He was watching her. His rifle hung loosely from his hands, but his posture was coiled, precise, dangerous. He was older than the rest. Lines etched deep into his face, eyes hard as glass. The kind of man who'd seen enough for to know when to take things seriously. "Ever fired one of these?" he asked. Elena froze. The question seemed ridiculous. She wanted to laugh, but the look in his eyes told her this wasn't a joke. "No, sir," she managed. The man stepped forward, holding out his weapon. A sniper rifle, matte black, fitted with a scope that gleamed like an unblinking eye. It looked heavier than she could ever manage. The other SEALs chuckled. One muttered something about babysitting. Another shook his head in disbelief. But the man, clearly their leader, didn't budge. He extended the rifle toward her until she had no choice but to take it. Her arm sagged under its weight. The metal was cold, unforgiving. The scope caught the sun and blinded her for a moment. "Set it up," the man said calmly. Elena swallowed hard, lowering herself onto the mat at the firing line. The rifle clunked against the sandbags. Her hands shook as she adjusted it, just like she'd seen others do 100 times. "Don't think," the man instructed, his voice steady, almost gentle. "Breathe. Align. Squeeze. That's it." The paper target downrange seemed impossibly far, a white blur in the shimmering heat. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She told herself this was stupid, pointless. She would miss, and they would laugh harder than ever. But as her eyes settled behind the scope, something strange happened. The world narrowed. The laughter faded. The target sharpened into focus. For the first time that morning, her hand stopped trembling. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked into her shoulder. Smoke puffed from the barrel. Downrange, the paper fluttered with a neat hole dead center. The range fell silent. Elena blinked, stunned. She almost thought it was a fluke. Luck, pure and simple. She wanted to hand the rifle back and disappear before anyone could say a word. But the man crouched beside her, his gaze never leaving hers. "Again," he said. She fired. Another center hit. Then another. The laughter was gone. Only the sound of her steady breathing and the crisp crack of the rifle filled the air. When she finally lowered the weapon, her heart racing, her shoulder bruised, the man reached out and steadied the rifle in her hands. "Name's Commander Rourke," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "And I think you just found your place. For the first time in her life, Elena felt the shift, like a door opening onto a world she hadn't known existed. She had come to replace targets, but she was walking away with something far heavier: possibility. Elena didn't expect the SEALs to call her back. She assumed it had been a one-time stunt, a commander's whim. By the next morning, she was back to scrubbing floors and fetching crates. But at dusk, a runner found her. "Rourke wants you at the range." Now, she thought it was a mistake. She even considered ignoring it. But something inside her, a pull, dragged her back. The range looked different in the fading light. Shadows stretched long across the sand. The air smelled of oil and gunpowder. And waiting for her, the firing line, was Rourke, his expression unreadable, his rifle already laid out. "Tonight," he said, "you learn what a rifle really is." The next hours blurred into a relentless rhythm of commands and corrections. Check your cheek weld. Control your breathing. Focus on the trigger, not the target. Each shot drilled into her muscles, into her bones. She failed over and over, missed, jerked, fumbled. And every time, Rourke reset her, his voice calm but firm, never mocking, never giving her room to quit. By midnight, her shoulder was raw, her eyes burned, and her hands stank of gun oil. But when she looked downrange, she saw the tight grouping of holes punched neatly into the paper. Not luck, not chance, skill. Rourke finally let her stand. "You've got instincts," he admitted, almost reluctantly. "Most recruits spend years trying to find what you just did in hours. But instincts aren't enough." Elena wanted to protest, to say she wasn't supposed to be here, that she wasn't a SEAL, wasn't even a shooter. But the words caught her throat, because deep down, she knew he was right. "Tomorrow," he said, handing her the rifle with a weight that felt ceremonial, "you're not replacing targets. You're training with us." The SEALs in the shadows muttered in disbelief. A girl? A rookie? A nobody? But Rourke's word was law. Elena walked back to her bunk long after midnight, her body aching, her ears ringing. She lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, the echo of gunfire still sharp in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't dreaming of survival. She was dreaming of precision, of impossible shots, of carrying the weight of steel and trust. She had stepped onto the range as an errand girl. Now, whether she liked it or not, she was on the path to becoming a marksman, and the world she knew was about to change forever. The mornings on the range blurred into one another, but Elena never forgot the sting in her shoulder, the weight of the rifle, or Rourke's watchful eyes. Training with the SEALs wasn't glamorous. It was brutal. On her third day, the sun was barely rising when Rourke ordered her onto the line again. "We're increasing your distance," he said, pointing toward a fresh set of targets pushed far downrange. The heat shimmered so thickly that Elena could barely see the outlines. "I can't even make them out," she muttered. "That's the point," Rourke replied. "Your eyes will adjust. Trust the glass." The rifle was already set up. She dropped behind it, settling into the dirt, and lined up her cheek on the stock. Through the scope, the target wavered, ghost-like in the morning haze. She fired once, missed by a mile. The SEALs behind her chuckled. Again, Rourke ordered. Shot after shot, she missed. Her hands trembled, her breathing faltered, her confidence cracked. Sweat stung her eyes, but Rourke's commands cut through the fog. Adjust left. Relax your grip. Trust your sight picture. By mid-morning, her arms were jelly. She wanted to scream, to quit, to tell him this wasn't what she'd signed up for. She was just supposed to replace targets. That was it. But then she remembered the hole she'd punched dead center on her first attempt days ago. That impossible, perfect shot. The spark of something she couldn't name. So she bit down on her frustration and kept firing. Hours later, with her body screaming and her vision blurred, she squeezed the trigger again. This time, the bullet tore straight through the black center of the target. The laughter behind her stopped. Even the desert wind seemed to hush. Rourke's hand landed firmly on her shoulder. "That's what happens when you stop doubting yourself," he said. The exhaustion hit her all at once, but beneath it was something stronger: pride. That night, though, The doubts returned. Lying awake in her cot, Elena stared at the rifle leaning against the wall. It wasn't hers. It belonged to men who had fought and bled for years, who had earned the right to carry it. What gave her the right? Her mind turned over every whispered comment from the SEALs. The disbelief in their voices. The scoffs. The quiet laughter when she walked past. She wasn't one of them. She didn't belong. And yet, the rifle had felt like it was made for her. Every time she looked down that scope, the world narrowed into a single truth. She was meant to do this. Sleep eventually took her, restless and uneasy. But by dawn, when Roar called her name again, she rose without hesitation. She was bruised, battered, and filled with doubt. But she was also determined. And that determination was about to be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. By the end of her first week, Elena thought she'd seen the limits of training. She was wrong. Rourke led her out past the firing line, into the scrubby desert hills. The sun blazed overhead, and the weight of the rifle on her back felt heavier with every step. "We're not just shooting paper anymore," Rourke said, climbing the ridge. "Time to see if you can handle a moving target." At the crest, she saw them, metal silhouettes mounted on tracks, designed to roll unpredictably across the valley floor. They jerked and swerved like phantoms, almost impossible to follow. Her stomach dropped. "You want me to hit those?" she asked. "No," Rourke said evenly. "I expect you to miss. At first. Then I expect you to learn." He set up the rifle and gestured for her to lie down. The valley stretched endlessly in front of her, the targets weaving like taunts. She took a breath, lined up, and fired. The bullet tore into the dirt yards away. Again. Mississippi. Again. Miss. Her jaw clenched. Each failure cut deeper. The SEALs, watching from behind, muttered under their breath. But Rourke crouched beside her, unflinching. "Don't chase the target," he said. "Predict it. Anticipate. You don't follow the dance. You lead it." His words sank into her bones. She steadied her breathing, studied the rhythm of the target's motion, and fired again. This time, the bullet punched through steel. The clang rang out like music. Her chest heaved. She had done it. Not luck, not chance. She had read the motion, trusted her instincts, and made the shot. The SEALs behind her were silent. Rourke's expression didn't change, but his eyes held the faintest glint of satisfaction. "Good," he said, "but you're not done." The next hours were merciless. Targets appeared faster, darting unpredictably, forcing her to adapt on instinct. Her shoulders screamed with every recoil. Her vision swam, but she refused to quit. By sundown, she was hitting more than she missed. She collapsed back from the rifle, drenched in sweat, dust streaking her face. The others had drifted off, but Rourke stayed, crouching beside her. "You're earning it," he said. "Don't forget that." His words settled into her like steel. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about belonging. She wasn't thinking about what the SEALs thought of her. She was thinking about the next shot, and the one after that. Because this wasn't just training anymore. It was transformation. And the girl who had come to replace targets was being forged into something else entirely. The first time Elena heard live gunfire outside the range, it was distant, like thunder rolling over the horizon. She froze, ears straining. "That's not training fire," Rourke said quietly, scanning the desert with sharp eyes. The SEALs around him grew tense, their movements deliberate. For men who thrived in chaos, their sudden silence was telling. Elena's heart hammered. Until that moment, all of this had been controlled. Training. Safe. But the thunder in the distance was real combat, and the reminder hit her hard. They weren't out here for sport. They were preparing for war. That night, the camp was restless. Radios crackled with chatter she wasn't meant to hear. Words like movement, encroachment, and possible engagement. She lay awake, staring at the tense canvas ceiling, her mind racing. She wasn't supposed to be here, she reminded herself. She was supposed to replace targets and leave. But the rifle leaning beside her cot told a different story. At dawn, Rourke pushed her harder than ever. He set up drills under punishing heat, forcing her to fire in awkward positions. lying on rocks, shooting uphill, firing downhill at impossible angles. Each mistake echoed loudly in her bones, each miss followed by the weight of Rourke's stare. Again, he demanded, his voice unyielding. By midday, her hands were raw. The recoil had bruised her shoulder, deep purple. Still, she loaded another round. Why are you doing this? She snapped finally, her voice breaking. Because you need it, Rourke replied. He crouched close, his eyes locked onto hers. You think those men out there, he gestured toward the desert, are gonna go easy on you? You think they care if your shoulder hurts? They won't. They'll kill you. Unless you learn to kill them first. The words chilled her. Not because of their harshness, but because of their truth. And in that truth, Elena felt something shift. The girl who had once doubted her place, who had wondered if she belonged here, began to vanish. In her place rose someone colder, sharper, someone who understood what it meant to survive. That evening, Rourke handed her a battered notebook. Record your shots, your distances, your misses. Learn your patterns, he said. She opened the notebook and hesitated. The first blank page stared back at her, clean and unmarked, like her future. With shaking hands, she began to write. Each entry became a ritual. Distance, wind, impact. Successes were recorded with care, failures with even greater attention. The book became her silent confidant, capturing the grind of each day. When the others laughed at night, she sat alone, studying her notes. And though she still heard their whispers, they no longer cut as deeply. Because in the notebook, on the line, and under Rourke's relentless eye, she was becoming something undeniable. Not just a girl holding a borrowed rifle, a sniper in her own right. The ambush came without warning. It was near dusk, the camp glowing orange in the setting sun, when the first shots cracked through the stillness. Bullets snapped past Elena's tent, shredding canvas. She hit the dirt instinctively, heart pounding in her throat. Shouts erupted all around her, the seals snapping into motion with terrifying efficiency. Contact. East Ridge. Elena's hands shook as she crawled for cover. The air was thick with dust and smoke, the sharp tang of gunpowder burning her nose. Through the chaos, a hand yanked her upright. It was Rourke. His eyes burned with urgency. Get your rifle. She froze. This wasn't training. This wasn't paper targets or moving silhouettes. This was real. Now, he barked. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She scrambled for the rifle, slamming into position behind a rocky outcrop. The ridge across the valley lit up with muzzle flashes. The enemy was pouring down, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. Rourke crouched beside her. Range, 800 meters. You want to prove you belong? This is it. Her throat was dry, her vision swimming, but she pressed her cheek against the stock and looked through the scope. The world narrowed. One silhouette, darting between rocks. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The figure crumpled. Her first kill. Her chest heaved, the weight of it slamming into her, but there was no time to feel. Another silhouette emerged. Another shot. Another body dropped. The battlefield roared around her, but Elena's focus sharpened with every pull of the trigger. The chaos faded. Only the scope mattered. Only the targets. Rourke's voice was steady at her side. Adjust wind. Lead left. Good. Again. She obeyed, each shot more precise than the last. The ridge began to clear, enemy fire thinning under her relentless aim. Minutes later, the silence returned, broken only by the ringing in her ears and the pounding of her heart. When it was over, the SEALs regrouped, battered but alive. Eyes turned toward Elena. For once, there was no laughter, no whispers. Only a quiet recognition. Rourke looked at her, his expression unreadable. You held the line. The weight of what she'd done pressed on her chest, heavy and suffocating. She wasn't just training anymore. She had killed. And in that moment, she knew she could never go back to the girl who once came to replace targets. The battlefield quiet didn't last. The night after the ambush, Elena couldn't sleep. The notebook lay open on her cot, but her pen hovered uselessly over the page. What did she write? Confirmed kills. 3. The ink would stain the paper, but it wouldn't capture the truth, that each shadow she dropped had been a man. Their faces haunted her. She tried to remember if one had been young, if another had hesitated before firing. Were they soldiers? Insurgents? Fathers? Sons? Her chest ached with the weight of it. When dawn came, the SEALs moved like nothing had happened. They checked weapons, oiled gear, sharpened knives. Their ritual of readiness was both terrifying and comforting. An admission that survival wasn't guaranteed, but preparation gave them a chance. Rourke found her sitting apart, her notebook still empty. "You're quiet," he said. She looked up at him, her throat tight. "I killed people." "Yes," he said simply. The bluntness stung. She wanted comfort, absolution, something human. But instead, Rourke crouched down, his voice low but firm. "You didn't kill people. You killed enemies who wanted to kill your team. That's the difference. That's why you're still breathing. And why they're not." It wasn't enough to erase the guilt, but it planted something else in her. Understanding. War wasn't about clean victories or easy sleep. It was about protecting those who stood beside you. By midday, the camp was ordered to relocate. Intel suggested a larger force was moving through the valley, and the SEALs refused to sit still as prey. The march was brutal. Heat beat down on them, and dust filled every breath. Elena carried her pack until her shoulders screamed, but no one slowed down for her. No one treated her differently now. That night, they camped under a shattered ridge. Elena cleaned her rifle in silence, every scrape of the brush across the barrel strangely calming. Her weapon had become more than metal and wood. It was a lifeline. Rourke approached, tossing something into her lap. A small patch, black with silver stitching. She stared at it. "What is this?" "A mark," Rourke said. "Not official. Not recognized. But among us. It means you stood your ground." Her fingers trembled as she traced the stitching. She remembered the whispers of mockery when she'd first arrived. Now, whispers of respect had taken their place. But respect came at cost, and the true test was still ahead, because the shadows in the desert weren't done with them yet. The attack came before dawn. This time, there was no warning gunfire in the distance. The first explosion ripped through their camp like a thunderclap, throwing Elena hard against the ground. She scrambled for her rifle as shouts filled the air. "Contact! North Ridge! They've surrounded us." The SEALs formed a defensive line instantly, their movements brutal and precise. Elena dropped behind a boulder, her scope already searching. She saw them, dozens of enemy fighters pouring down the ridge, rifles flashing in the half-light. This wasn't harassment. This was annihilation. Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. "Elena, high-value target, west slope, white headscarf. He's calling shots." She found him in her scope, a figure gesturing wildly, directing the enemy like a conductor. Her pulse raced. Distance, over 1,000 meters. Wind, shifting. Her breath caught as she steadied the shot. "Do it," Rourke barked. The shot cracked. Through her scope, she saw the man collapse. The enemy line faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks. "Good hit," Rourke roared. "Keep them guessing." Elena shifted, fired again, dropped another target. Each shot was a thread, pulling the battle tighter in their favor. The SEALs moved like shadows, exploiting every hesitation. But the enemy was relentless. Grenades arced overhead, smoke and fire clawing at the camp. At one point, Elena's rifle jammed. Panic surged, but her hands moved almost on their own, clearing the chamber, slamming it back into action. She was no longer the girl fumbling with borrowed steel. She was a soldier holding the line. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then, finally silence. The last echoes of gunfire faded across the ridge. Smoke hung heavy, but the attackers were gone, scattered, broken. The SEALs regrouped, bloody but alive. One by one, their eyes turned to Elena, not as an outsider, not as a girl who came to replace targets, but as one of them. Rourke approached, dirt and sweat streaking his face. He didn't smile, but his words carried a weight she'd never forget. "You've earned it." Her chest tightened. She looked down at the rifle in her hands, scarred and battered, but hers. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Hers. For the first time, she felt the truth settle in her bones. She belonged. Not because she had asked. Not because she had wanted to prove something. But because she had walked through fire, and the fire had not consumed her. As the sun rose over the ridge, Elena opened her notebook and wrote a single line. I came to replace targets. I became the one they couldn't replace. And with that, her story was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation. It was about becoming more than anyone believed she could be.